Hey there, how are you today? This is Kim Harrington with Brownstone Building and Development, and I'm very excited to have a special guest joining us on the call today. But before I bring her on board and tell you a little bit about her, what I'd like to do is just welcome you to the call and talk a little bit about what we've put under agreement over the course of the last week. So I was just thinking about it before I jumped on the call today, and I believe there's just one project that we've put under agreement in the last 7 days. Specifically, it's a project out in Massachusetts that we've been eyeing. Another real estate agent that we know in the area brought us the opportunity. It's actually a bank-owned property, and it is a house that's in very, very rough shape. So we're going to actually be purchasing the home. We're going to knock down the house that's currently there, the structure that's currently there. And the good news is that the piece of land is actually 2 separate lots. So they're A&R, which is called Approval Not Required, and basically that's going to allow us to be able to knock down the current structure and build 2 new single-family homes. So I'm pretty excited about the project. We're going to close later this month. And again, we were able to get this under agreement because of the relationship that we have with the real estate agent. It's a bank-owned property, and doing a little bit of digging, we realized that there's actually an opportunity there to not only purchase the land and knock it down and build one house, but there's another lot that we're going to be able to subdivide out of it. So that'll be a really good opportunity for us. We're getting it for a killer price. It's definitely going to take some work. Usually we're in the $10,000 to $20,000 price range for the tear down, closer to $20,000 generally, with all the work that goes into actually knocking a structure down that's no longer able to be rehabbed, and then obviously disposing of all the debris. So it can be a little costly just to do that knockdown, but this will be a good project for us to work on through the winter and be able to get a couple new construction homes on the market in in the mid to later spring time frame. So we're pretty excited about it. The other thing that I just wanted to talk a little bit about today is mindset. So I'm going to give you a quick example, and I think that this is something that we all can work on. I'm in the middle of a really good book right now, and it's actually talking about kind of the brain and how the brain works. And I've heard a little bit about this, but I'm learning more in reading this book, and it's pretty sweet. So the concept that they're talking about in the chapter that I'm in now is talking about how the brain is constantly working, even when you are physically at rest. And the book itself is basically talking about the importance of rest for yourself, for your brain, for your body, and how high achievers so often, work 80, 90-hour work weeks, and they're constantly pushing themselves, working off of very little sleep. And the reality of the situation is that you could get so much more out of yourself by actually allowing your body that rest. And, it's a good concept, and I realize that everybody's a little bit different. Everybody has, a different number of hours that they need to sleep every night to feel rejuvenated. I have some friends that, that get by and feel really good on less amount of sleep than I do. But on average, most people, the way that we're wired, really need to get somewhere between 7 and 9 hours of sleep a night. And 9 hours of sleep, that can sound pretty excessive, right? But I think that it's important to realize that you need to listen to your body and make sure that you're getting enough sleep for yourself and what you require, right? But the cool part that I want to talk about this book is what they're covering is how detail-oriented the brain is and how it's working even when you're resting. And they talk about, folks who are trying to solve very complex problems, or they're dealing with struggles maybe in their work, and they're trying to figure out really complex things. And what typically will happen is that you'll spend a significant amount of time consciously working on a problem, And then it's important to allow yourself to kind of step away from that problem. So if you're not able to find the solution right away, if it's a really complex issue, then you need to allow yourself to step away from that problem for a bit. And over a little bit of time, your brain is going to be working on the solution subconsciously. And I thought this was really cool, and I've actually seen it play out so often in my own life and even my children's life. I was talking to my son the other day, and I was downstairs in the basement, and he's into robotics. He's 10 years old, and he's working on a specific challenge for this group called First Lego League. So there's a handful of different challenges that they have to do using a robot, and then they go to a competition in December to compete against other teams. So he's working on a specific challenge, trying to get this robot to do something specific, and he was really struggling with it. He was getting really aggravated with himself and just getting very, very frustrated. And so, I was talking to him a little bit about this concept, and obviously he at 10 years old doesn't really totally understand how the brain works. And I mean, as an adult, I think most of us don't really realize the power behind our own brains. But I was talking to him a little bit about the importance of kind of stepping away if you're coming up against a roadblock that you're not able to solve, and that subconsciously when we're resting or when we have our downtime, the brain will be working on those things. So for example, at nighttime, when you go to sleep, your brain is still working quite a bit, and it's kind of processing everything that happened through the day. And if you're working on anything during that day, any challenges, things that you're trying to figure out, your brain will actually start to try and solve those while you sleep. And I thought it was a pretty cool concept, and so I told him, let's give this a try, right? You're getting really frustrated now. You're not able to figure this challenge out today, so let's just take a break from it, and we can come back and and hit it tomorrow and see if we can solve it. And so we did that. We took a break from the work, and the next day he said, hey, Mom, I want to go down and work on the robot for a little bit. I said, all right, I'll be down in a little bit. And sure enough, I let him down for about a half an hour before I went down to check on him. And when I walked down, he was so excited because he had actually solved the problem that he was up against and worked through this particular challenge to find a solution and get the robot to do what he needs to do. And I was really excited for him. And he said, you know what, Mom, you're right. Sometimes it's better to just take that step away. So I just encourage all of you, when you're coming up against some challenges in your life, whether it have to do with the real estate business or not, give yourself some time, some downtime to process that. Because what I like to kind of think of it as is when you challenge your brain to come up with a solution for something, your brain isn't going to let you down. It might take a little bit of time, and you might have to be a little bit patient with it, but I've seen this happen so often in my own life and in those around me. I've just really found it to be true, and I just think it's fascinating how the brain works and how powerful our brains are, power that we just can't even really understand or grasp ourselves. And this is new, relatively new in science, and, scientists and folks that study, the human brain and how it works. This concept is relatively new, 10, 20, 30 years old, and they're just learning more and more about it now. So I just thought it was a cool concept, and I just wanted to share that with you folks. So if you're working on something that is very challenging, that you can't totally figure out, that you're struggling with, challenge yourself and challenge your brain to kind of work to solve that problem, and then make sure you get enough rest, you get enough downtime to actually be able to see. And I think you'll see it play out, because like I said, I've seen it so much in my own life that, after a day or two, you come back to that same challenge, that same problem, and you have a lot of fresh ideas, a lot of new inspiration in ways that you can solve it. So that's kind of just some food for thought that I wanted to give you guys today. Now, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce a very special guest that we have joining us today. If you'll bear with me for just a moment, I'm going to grab her on the other line, and I'll be right back to you. All right. So thanks for that moment of silence there while I went ahead and grabbed Lenia on the other line. So what I'd like to do is introduce you today to an absolutely rock star real estate agent, Lenia Driscoll. She's a part of our team, and I'm really excited to be talking with her today because over the course of the week we've gotten some questions around how to place offers on properties as an investor. And I thought, you know what, I could answer these questions myself, but I'm actually going to bring on the person that manages all of this for our office and who does a way better job than I ever would in this role. So, Lenia, do you want to say hello to everyone?
Sure. Hi. Hi, everyone.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much for joining us today, Lenia.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, so Lenia's been working with us for a number of years now. Lenia, how long have you been with us?
It's going on 6 years now.
6 years. All right, awesome. And we would never let Lenia go. There's been a couple times when other real estate agencies have tried to convince her to move to their agency, and we always put a stop to that because we value Lenia so much in our brokerage and also in our real estate investing business. So, like I said,
thank you.
Oh yeah, of course. Lenia provides a lot of really good support to our business, specifically around what you would be dealing with as a real estate agent in listing houses and getting offers accepted and so on and so forth. So I thought what we could do today, Lenia, is just talk a little bit about what goes into putting an offer in when you're looking as an investor to purchase a rehab type of property. And then after we talk about that, we can talk about, you know, what it takes to actually get it sold on the back end. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, awesome. So one of the questions that came into the line was specifically around how to place an offer on a property. So this particular investor must have found a property that they really like. They've done their analysis. The numbers seem to work, and they're ready to place their offer. So, Lenia, if you could, just talk a little bit about kind of how we put that offer together and what people need to make sure they include in the offer as a real estate investor. So just talk a little bit through that process for me, if you could.
Sure. So when we go ahead and, you know, we've gone to the point where we're ready to place an offer on a property, the most important thing to do is follow their offer instructions to a T. A lot of different banks will have very strict offer instructions, and if you don't follow them correctly, they're not even going to consider your offer, no matter what your offer is. And it could be something as silly as there's one bank that if you don't check off the box that if you're going to use your attorney or their attorney to do the title, if you don't check that off correctly, they'll bounce it back to you. There's a lot of silly things you have to do, but you have to make sure you read and reread the instructions prior to submitting the offer. Some will have you go through Hubzoo to upload your offer. It all depends. You have to make sure you read their offer instructions. We usually try to do 10% in escrow, so you come out strong, and you want to make sure to let everybody know that and where you're coming in as an investor, you're going to take the property as is, so you want to include that in your offer. A lot of the times they have failed septic systems, which you're going to take on, so you'll want to make sure that's disclosed in your offer, that you're accepting that as a failed septic system. You want to make sure you do a lot of due diligence. We had an instance that we purchased the home at auction, and it turned out that there was an ongoing issue with the EPA because the old owners had spilled oil in the basement of the home, and it seeped through to the dirt. And it turns out that there was going to be over $300,000 to basically pick up the house, clean up the oil, and then put the house back. It was just something crazy. So we're able to back out of that and even get our deposit back on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that was a crazy one, right? You think you're all excited you get the house under contract, and then you start to dig in a little bit more, and you're like, uh-oh, we don't want this house under contract.
Yeah, and it was a gorgeous house. It was a nice colonial in a great area. It was almost too good to be true, and it was.
Yeah, absolutely. No, good point. That's a good point. You talked about escrow, Lenia. what specifically for newer investors, what is escrow? You could explain that.
Escrow is the money you're gonna put up front with your offer. There'll be two escrow payments. One is going to be with the offer, and usually we do that one as a lower one. So we usually do $1,000 with an offer, and once the offer is accepted, then they usually want you to make up the difference of what usually a 10% down payment would be, and that's basically to secure the buyer to that sale. So if you ended up backing out, then they would lawfully be able to keep that unless you had, usually if you're going in as an investor, you're not going to have the financing, as a way to get out of it. So you pretty much would lose that money if you just backed away and you didn't have probable cause under one of the mortgage clauses.
Yeah, good point. So like Lenia said, we will typically put our offers in and we'll make them as-is offers. So the house itself, we're not asking the sellers to do anything with it. Obviously, that's very attractive for sellers, whether it be a bank or, a private seller, because, we're taking the house as is and they don't have to do any repairs in order to get it sold to us, which is fantastic. But obviously, when you come across a situation like that, you're taking on greater risk as well. So you need to be cognizant of that. And one thing, Lenia, we can talk a little bit about when you're dealing with bank-owned properties, foreclosed properties, REOs, oftentimes we'll actually, when we submit our offer, we won't say that it's cash, we'll say it's private financing. And the reason we do that is specifically because if you tell a bank that it's a cash offer, they expect it to be cash and sometimes won't even let you place a private mortgage to have it recorded once you purchase the house. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, Lenia, and kind of how we work around that when we're dealing specifically with bank owned?
Yeah, so on all of the bank-owned offers, they make you check off what kind of financing you have. If you have private funding, cash, and if it is privately funded, are you using public funds? So you need to disclose to them that you're not, you are using private funding and you're not using public fund. It's not being, funded publicly. It's to a private investor. So you definitely have to let that be known at the get-go, because even if you have different entities you would purchase the property under, what you put on that offer is what is possible. They will carry that on to the P&S. You will not be able to make any changes to the purchase and sales agreement once it's been drafted. So it will be a lot of heartache if you mess up on that offer.
Yeah, no kidding. That's a really good point, Lenia. When you're dealing with bank-owned properties, you want to make sure you have all your ducks in a row when you're putting in that initial offer, because they're not going to want you to change or let you change anything. You want to say it's private financing if you really are getting a private, mortgage on the house. You want to make sure that you've got the right entity name. That's another thing that, is a little frustrating. We have a handful of different LLCs that we buy in, and, sometimes we're not 100% sure which one we want to put it in right when we make the offer. But with bank-owned, we have to figure that out, because, if you try to change the buyer name from one entity to another, they'll typically, put an axe to that. So that's a really good point, Lenia. It's important to make sure you've got your ducks in a row ahead of time as you're putting in that offer. Any other kind of things that you think would be important for investors to understand or make sure that they do as they're submitting an offer on a property that's going to end up being a rehab?
Yep. You definitely, you want to include a proof of funds from the investor that you're going to be getting the money from, if that's the case. You want to include all that in your offer packet. You want it to be as complete as can be so that there will be no questions, because if the real estate agent that's listing that property is going to have to get back to you, can you please send proof of funds, you're pretty much losing your spot to someone who did get all their ducks in a row and basically had a complete package. So you could see the more attractive price, but they're not going to chase you. They don't care. They're going to get their commission from the bank, whether they sell it to you or the next guy. So they're going to go for the path of least resistance and who did a complete packet and submitted it properly, and they're not going to want to chase you. So, when you submit that offer, be prepared for that to be your best foot forward. And, try to make a good relationship with the different REO real estate agents that list the properties. You'll get to know them after a while because a lot of them get the same bank to list with them often. So you make relationships with those people so that when they see your offer come through, if they like working with you, they're gonna want to work with you. So you try to build those relationships with them as well.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Lenia, right? Like, be personable. You always want to try and build those relationships because, like Lenia said, these guys, they know they're going to sell the house to somebody, and they don't really care who they sell it to because they're going to get the commission either way. But if you are really tight on your process, you make sure you're getting all of the information to them right from the start, and you're filling everything out appropriately, and you're also being pretty amicable to them as you're talking with them, getting to know them a little bit, getting them to like you, you're going to be able to get a lot further in getting these transactions completed than, if you're all business and you don't, you're rude, you're not kind to them, because they could submit your offer. They're the ones that are trying to, get the transaction completed with a path of least resistance, as Lenia said, and I think that's a really important point. And that's part of the reason why I love having Lenia as part of our team, because she does such a good job at building relationships with folks. Lenia, you're very personable, you are very organized and very detail-oriented, and that helps, right? If everybody...
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. After, usually after, we have a sale go through, a lot of the agents will send me on Facebook. It actually, puts a face to the name, and it's excellent if they see one of our offers come through again. They'll love working with us. We've had so many different agents say, we look forward to dealing with you guys because you know what you're doing. We're not gonna lose a sale by going with you guys. We know it's once it comes through, it's gonna go to the end, and it's gonna be a very smooth transaction, and that's what they want. They don't want to have to, be like pulling teeth because they don't care. They just want to sell the property, move on to the next one. So they love it when it's someone that they look forward to working with. At the end of your email, say, have a great day. You know what? They're going to remember that because 98% of their emails from that day are not going to tell them to have a great day. They want them to remember you.
Yeah, that's so true. Absolutely. That's awesome, Lenia. All right, cool. So I think we've covered pretty much everything that we would need to in submitting an offer for a property that you're trying to get under agreement, right? So to recap, you want to make sure you have all your ducks in a row. You have your proof of funds letter ahead of time so that you can submit that with your offer, making sure that if there's any special instructions or documents that you need to fill out, especially if it's bank-owned, you're doing that appropriately. Typically, the standard that we have is 10% down for escrow, and we break that up to maybe $500 or $1,000 up front at the signing of the offer, and then the rest at the signing of purchase and sale. That's how Massachusetts works. In Ohio and some other states, they go directly to the purchase contract, so you'd put all that money up front right away. It shows your level of seriousness. Make sure also if you are using private financing that you, especially on bank-owned, you don't say cash, but you say private financing so that you're able to actually record that mortgage at closing and they have no issue with it. And then be personable, be friendly, make sure that you're organized and also trying all the time to build good relationships with your, with the other agent that you're working with because it makes a big, big difference in the long run for your business. So that's awesome. All right, Lenia, let's talk a little bit about the things that we want to kind of train on when it comes to reselling the house, right? So investor buys the house, they rehab it, they get it up for resale. Talk a little bit about the importance of choosing a solid agent and what you need to look for in an agent who's going to list the house for you for resale.
Sure. Well, first you'll want to see, who does the majority of sales in the area that you are looking to sell the home in. And then, do a little research. Once you see who has the most sales, then you go in and look at all their different listings and see how good a job they did. You'll want, someone who takes good pictures and, has the pictures all going one direction and it's not blurry and the pictures aren't dark because everyone nowadays starts off looking at the property on the Internet. So you want to make sure that the agent you select either hires a professional photographer or has a really good camera and can take very good pictures themselves, and make sure that they write the descriptions of the property, and basically, the majority of people, before they go to the home to even look at it, they're going to do their research online first in this day and age. So you'll want to make sure whoever you select, it's a great agent. You want to see how responsive they are. So if you reach out to them to talk to them about possibly listing the property with them, you want to make sure they're responsive, that they're getting back to you in a timely fashion, because if they're not getting back to you, they're not going to be getting back to that prospective buyer that is reaching out to purchase your property.
Good point. Very good point. Absolutely. Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about what we do, kind of the pre-work that we do on our properties before we actually put them on the market for resale. Now this, like you said, the pictures are one thing. You want to make sure that you get really, really great pictures, whether they be professionally done or with an agent that really knows what they're doing. What are some of the other things that we do kind of, in preparation to list?
Sure. Well, as of the last couple of years, we started doing pre-home inspections. So from different sales, I had developed a relationship with a home inspector who I met on several home inspections, and I really liked him because he was no nonsense, but yet he made, whatever issues did come up on the home inspection, he would relay it to the buyer in a nice, easy fashion where they didn't get spooked and run away from purchasing the home. So I kind of approached him and asked him if he was interested in doing pre-home inspections for our homes that we are getting ready to list. And so we made a deal with him, and we pay him $250 per home inspection, and he goes in by himself. We give him the lockbox, and he emails us that following evening a list of all the items on the house that he feels we should address prior to listing it, something that would be coming up on a home inspection from the buyer once they would put an offer and get it accepted. So since we've been doing that, we tighten up the home inspection repair list a lot. Usually it'll be things that we missed because we're going in and kind of looking around but not picking up on, and it's something that him with his trained eye can pick up and, write it down for us, and then we have the project managers address and repair the issues before we even list it.
Yeah, and that helps so much. It's so funny now that we that's part of our, best practices, and we do it on every house. Every now and then, if there's a house a little bit outside of the area that we work in, or, we're rushing to get it on the market, and we don't follow that best practice, it ends up biting us, right? Because there's more issue that comes up. Obviously, home inspectors, they have to justify their existence. They have to find certain things that need to get done or should get done to the home, no matter how much work you've done to it, right? There's always going to be something that comes up. So it's been a really, really good addition to, our process to have that home inspector come in ahead of time. And, sometimes if he brings up a few little things, we'll actually let them go and allow the end buyer's home inspector to pick them up, knowing that we're going to have to get them fixed, but, leaving a few things out there so that home inspector, is able to kind of justify their work and, in the work that they're doing going in to review the home. But we take care of anything that may pop up that would be big, that may scare a potential homeowner away after seeing the report. So some items that come to mind when I think of something scaring away potential home buyers is mold. Mold's a big one. Everybody's afraid of mold, and everyone is afraid of termite damage or powder post beetle damage. So it's very helpful when we get that taken care of prior, and it's been resolved by the time the buyer's home inspector gets there to look over the property, because then it's not such a huge thing where they think the house is going to fall down because there's a little bit of termite damage. Right, absolutely. And that's something that always comes up on a home inspection, right? Like most homes, especially in the areas of the country that we work in, there's some kind of, effect that, termites or like I said, the beetles have. So when that comes up, for us to be able to have the certificate showing that we've taken care of it in the sense that we've treated for it, so that that kind of issue isn't going to keep occurring. It's just able to kind of put that flame out right away. No issue. We've taken care of it ahead of time, and they feel that much more secure in knowing that, hey, well, if they did this ahead of time, then they must have really done a very thorough job, and they'll feel better about purchasing a home that we've rehabbed. So yeah, that's a great point. All right, cool. Let's talk a little bit about let's say, for example, we have a house that we list it, and we get an offer in, or we get multiple offers in. What are some of the things that investors should look at when they're dealing with retail home buyers when they're reviewing offers? So best case scenario, you put a house on the market, you've priced it right, and so you get a bunch of interest on it, and you get maybe 2 or 3 different offers. So when you're comparing offers like that to get your property resold, why don't you talk a little bit about what we look at? Because it isn't always just the highest offer that we go with. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So it's not always going to be, the highest offer. It's going to be the most solid offer. Someone having a sale contingency is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not. You don't want to put their offer on the bottom of the pile because they have a home to sell. If you look at the home, it's already under agreement. They've already gone through home inspection. They have a purchase and sales already signed. You can probably feel a little, if their offer is good and their financing is solid, I would not, think twice before going with that person, because they're going to be homeless once their house sells. And that's, solidifying your sale as well, because they're not going to have anywhere to go. So even if something turns up and there's an issue on them purchasing your home, they're going to do everything they can to purchase your home because they need a home to live in. Another thing is be wary about the internet lending finance companies. A lot of the, I'm trying to think of the name of the loan companies. A lot of the, the online companies, we've had nothing but, I'm trying to think of one. I can't even think of one.
Like those folks from Lending Tree, you mean? Like sometimes the people that call you, if you put your info on Lending Tree, these like fly-by-night,
Yeah, and a couple of them are not even fly-by-night. They're pretty popular, but it's just a bunch of red tape once you actually accept their offer. They basically, from the get-go, they seem excellent, and then as you go along, it just turns into a nightmare. They're not ordering appraisals right away like they're supposed to. They're not responding. They're not held accountable. Whereas if it's, a lender you've done business with and you're comfortable with, they, respond to you and you know where they are. Where if it's one of those internet ones, be very wary. Also be very wary about a couple of different banks. They're big banks, but their loan processes are ridiculous. We've had, not a lot of luck with Bank of America, Citizens Bank. It's those 2 banks are always red flags when I see an offer come in from one of those banks. So you can't tell them to use your loan officer or someone you're comfortable with. However, you can ask them if they want to, in order for you to accept their offer, that you want to have them pre-approved by a lender that you're comfortable with, which we do when we see those online ones. And we've always had, if the person really wants the house, they'll do anything to get the house. So.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Absolutely. Like Lenia said, you can't force them to use, a mortgage rep or a bank or a lender that you want them to. However, you can ask them to at least have the conversation with a lender that is reputable and that can get things done, in order to ensure that that pre-approval letter that they're giving you when they submit the offer is legitimate, and that they actually can get the loan that they would be applying for. And oftentimes it works out when we ask them to do that. They end up really liking the person that they're talking to, that we know is a great mortgage rep, right? And we're not getting anything out of it besides knowing that if they give the thumbs up that, yes, these people are financeable, they're going to be able to get the deal done. And to us, that makes a world of a difference, right? world of a difference. So sometimes they end up liking the mortgage rep that we introduce them to, and they end up getting moving forward with them, as opposed to the online banker rep that they were talking with. So yeah, that's a really good point. Let's drill into the lending side of things a little bit more, Lenia. Why don't you talk a little bit about, so let's say you've accepted the offer, right? You've gone through, you said these folks look the best. Maybe they're not the highest offer, maybe they are, but their financing looks strong. They're putting, some money down, and you know that they really fell in love with the house. A lot of times we'll get letters from folks saying how much they love the house and how much they hope that, that we'll choose their offer and moving forward. And so they're vested. So now let's talk a little bit about follow-up that we do on our end when it comes to making sure that transaction is going to get done in a timely fashion. First off, what's the typical time frame, Lenia, from the time we accept an offer to the time we close? When a homeowner, when a buyer is getting financing, how long does it usually take?
I've seen it be as quick as 30 days to around, the average is around 45. You have to have a really great lender to be able to close on time when you're getting that 30-day closing. It can be done. I closed on my own house in 24 days, but that was because I knew what I was doing, and I was even on top of the mortgage officer. Hey, have you ordered the appraisal? Hey, how's that appraisal come back? Hey, did you get that addendum signed? So I was, on her, so we were able to close a lot sooner than we had, projected. But that's not going to be the case if, usually on average we're about 45 days. From the time we receive the offer, once it's accepted and signed, I start drafting the purchase and sales agreement. We always, if they try to get, inspections 10, 15 days out, we always counter with 7 days. We want that home inspection done as soon as possible, and we want to know what issues they want to bring up in case we don't want to go with that buyer and we want to go with a backup buyer. So I always keep my backup offers on ice until I know that the current buyer is going to move forward with, the purchase after the home inspection. I always start drafting the purchase and sales agreement the next day, if not the same day that I accept the offer. And I send it over to them, ask for any revisions, and they understand, a home inspection is a clause to get out of purchasing the property if they're unsatisfied with the home inspection. So it's not, I don't get too much resistance in having the buyer sign the purchase and sales agreement prior to having the home inspection. Basically, I like to get everything ready so that as soon as the home inspection is done, their mortgage officer already has the purchase and sales agreement, and they're already getting the buyer to pay for their appraisal and having that appraisal scheduled. And then we basically have to babysit the mortgage officer. Basically, we do it on a weekly basis. We do little touch-ups, just asking if they've asked already, if they've already ordered the appraisal, are they waiting for any documents from the buyer? Have they already ordered their tax transcripts, which sometimes, can take a few weeks. So we don't want that to be the delay on the back end.
Yeah, all good, all very good. And you shouldn't feel shy. You shouldn't feel shy about reaching out to that mortgage rep for the end buyer and asking them these questions. So don't feel bad about doing that. That's all it takes is a deal or two to blow up, and you're going to be doing it for every transaction. So learn from us and don't have a deal blow up. Actually do that follow-up on a weekly basis with the mortgage rep as well. Lenia, as you were talking there, another thought had occurred to me that I think it would be important for folks to understand. So talk a little bit about when a home inspection is completed and they want a few items taken care of, how do we handle that?
Sure. Well, they usually have a laundry list, just silly things, tighten this, do that. Basically, we'll do the majority. If it's something that's, if it makes sense and it's not something that they're just being nitpicky about, we always, do that repair just to keep everything flowing smoothly. But what we always do is we always do a repair agreement outside of the purchase and sales agreement, because anything you add to the purchase and sales agreement is going to be incorporated into the purchase and sales agreement and become part of it. So that means that it would go to the loan officer, and then the loan officer would have to send that whole repair list to the appraiser. And especially if it's something like termite damage or, something with the electricity, it's a safety issue. And then they'll have to come back and inspect it again after they've already done their first appraisal. And that basically turns into delays. And then the buyer has to pay a reappraisal fee of $125. And it's just always from the get-go, you make it a point to the agent that you're dealing with that you want to have that outside of the purchase and sales agreement, and you want your agent to draft that repair agreement. Because a lot of the times, if the buyer has an attorney and they are drafting the repair agreement, they're going to put a lot of verbiage in there that's to cover their client so that they can earn the money that they're being paid for, but it's basically just there to protect the buyer and not you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So make sure that repair agreement is outside of the purchase and sale. That's totally legal to do. There's nothing wrong with that. You make sure the agents are on board with it, and that's how it's handled. And then also that you're drafting it based upon the requests that they're making. And you want to be clear on that, on that punch list of items, what needs to get done and how it's going to get done and so on and so forth, so that there's no question about it and it's easily, checkable once the work has been completed. So I think that's a really, really important piece there to make sure that repair addendum is outside of the purchase and sale agreement. That's good. How about home inspections, Lenia? Tell us a little bit about how we handle home inspections and how we recommend other investors do it when they have retail buyers doing a home inspection on the home that they just rehabbed.
Sure. Well, we always attend our home inspections, whether it's myself, project manager, or a handyman, depending on what our schedules are. We always attend. You don't want to, be pushy, because then the home inspector and the buyer might feel uncomfortable with having you there, and they'll ask you to step away from their home inspection. So, be friendly, make conversation. You're only there because you want to write down anything that, might need clarification as far as the repairs, and you want to make sure it's done correctly. And you just observe and stand back. Don't get in their way. Don't interject when he's trying to explain something that's wrong with the house to the buyer. You basically just, sit back and take it in, and you can take your notes on things that he's bringing up that, it might or may not come up on their home inspection repair list. But basically, you don't want to be a pet, because they rightfully can ask you, not to be near them when they're doing their home inspection. So you just want to be comfortable where they're comfortable with you being and observing it.
Yeah, good point. Absolutely. Don't be a nuisance, but just be there to be able to answer questions that they might have about any work that was completed or whatnot. And then also, obviously, you want to be aware of any issues that might come up. So a lot of times it's a matter of, somebody getting nervous about something and just being able to have the conversation and say, hey, don't worry about it. I know that these sellers are going to be able to take care of that. So they'll fix it. They'll do what they need to take care of the issue. So then that retail buyer doesn't have to be so nervous or get so upset or nervous about something. A lot of times, at least in the markets that we work in, we're dealing with a lot of first-time home buyers, or maybe step-up second-time home buyers. And, this whole process, you need to realize as a real estate investor, is brand new to them as a buyer, right? So it might be their first or second home. It's not something that they do every single day. So little things can make them nervous. And if you can be there kind of through every step of the process, making sure that they understand that you don't have to be nervous. We can take care of this. It isn't a big deal. It's something we do all the time, right? And get them to feel comfortable with working with you, your transaction is going to go way, way smoother. So that's all great, great information there, Lenia, for folks. Man, we've covered a lot. We've covered a lot of information, Lenia. Is there anything else? Any other kind of last-minute things that you'd like to kind of throw out there, pointers for investors when they're, looking to purchase or to resell their rehabs? We covered a lot.
One thing, yeah, there's so much. I'm trying to think what I've missed. One thing I always, whenever Chris or Kim bring a property that they're interested in flipping, and if I'm around and I hear it, we always try to stay away for houses that are right on the street. Nobody wants to buy those houses.
It's a really good point, yeah?
Yeah, stay away from those. Trying to think. Be mindful of flood zone areas that you're going to need flood insurance. It's not as easy to sell a home that's in the flood zone as there is a home that's not, because they're going to incur extra costs for flood insurance. May it not be that much, it scares people, and they're worried that they're going to, get water in their basement. So be mindful of that, unless it's a really great deal and you can't pass up. But, just be mindful of flood zones.
Yeah, we go as far as to actually get a quote from our the company that we use to insure our properties. We get a quote from them. What's it going to cost for this retail buyer once they purchase it in flood insurance on a yearly basis? And then we can give that quote to that potential buyer so they understand, hey, it's only going to be an extra $50 a month, or it's going to be an extra $300 a month, right? So they know what they're getting into. And obviously we're making sure that we're listing our listing price is appropriate and in line with understanding that they're going to have that additional cost if it is in a flood zone. Very good point.
Yep. And try not to flip too many at once in the winter months, because you're not going to be able to sell them as quickly. Usually when it comes to September, October, November, we slow it down so that we're not holding on to homes over the winter where you're going to have holding costs, because before the holidays, it's very seldom, you get a house under agreement. It usually ramps up around January, February, right before the spring market's a great time to put a house on the market. So just, slow it down when it comes close to the winter months so that you're not stuck holding on to the property until after the new year.
Yeah,
I think that's all I can think of.
All right, that's awesome, Lenia. Thank you so much for all of this information and new knowledge for the folks on the call. I really appreciate your time. And like I said, Lenia is a wealth of knowledge. She's been working with us for years, and the experience that she can bring to a transaction is absolutely phenomenal. And I encourage you, as a real estate investor, to find your own Lenia. Don't try and take ours, of course, but you find your own Lenia. She has your back as a real estate agent, understands how transactions can be put together, and most of all is somebody who's looking to make sure they can hold transactions together and solve problems. Being able to work on things and find solutions as opposed to just raising red flags. So that's awesome. Lenia, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Hope everyone has a great day. Take care.
All right. Thanks so much. And for everyone else on the call, thank you for your time today. Don't hesitate to shoot us any questions, feedback, perspective that you might have. coaching@brownstonerg.com. Send us an email with anything that you'd like to hear, any questions that you might have as you're working through your own deals. We're here to help you. We're here to support you, and we want to be able to do that on an ongoing basis. All right. Thanks, everybody, for your time. We look forward to talking with you again next week. And until then, have a great week. Take care.